Welcome back to episode 8 of From the Couch Sports. Today I got a lot I want to get into. Most notably, we want to get into the Russ trade. I want to get into some UFC stuff a little later. And then I also want to kind of lay my thoughts out on a, pre-free agency mock draft as well. Last couple days in the NFL have been wild. Pretty much every day there's been some kind of significant trade. And this is all kind of leading up to free agency, which I believe that the legal tampering period begins next Monday, which means players can officially sign on Wednesdays. So we kind of have a lot of stuff going on when it comes to the NFL. And, this kind of kicked off the other day with Aaron Rodgers making the decision to stay in Green Bay. And, I don't really blame the guy. I know a lot of people thought that, this was his last year, last year, 2021, and that he wasn't going to return. But then when you kind of dig deeper into it, it's like, the team that Aaron Rodgers is on currently is the team that gives him the best chance to win a Super Bowl, especially versus, going to another team and having that team give up a lot of capital to bring Aaron Rodgers in. So it was totally understandable. And then the funny thing is this whole media narrative that they enjoy bashing Aaron Rodgers, and it's ridiculous. Just simply because the media doesn't like who Aaron Rodgers is off of the field, they don't like the decisions he makes or the way he goes about certain things. And because of this, they just choose to kind of create false narratives surrounding Aaron Rodgers and just kind of bash the guy. This kind of was all started with a rumor a couple weeks ago from quote-unquote league sources saying that Aaron Rodgers is demanding $50 million a year. And, maybe he does get $50 million if he does wind up signing the extension. But to say he's demanding this, Aaron Rodgers is back-to-back MVP. If he wanted to be the highest paid player in football, he kind of earns it, we can bash on his playoff success all you want, but when it comes to regular season success, this is one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. And it's kind of funny because he kind of is in that similar Peyton Manning boat. Peyton Manning didn't have a lot of playoff success either. Consistent MVPs, but then when it came to the playoffs, he, always came up short. And the thing too about when you're in the playoffs, it's a team sport. So to put all the blame on Aaron Rodgers solely, it's wrong in my opinion, and it's fairly obvious how much hate this guy gets from a lot of people around the league. But anyways, this kind of started the chain of events that we're going to talk about next. Because the Packers are retaining Aaron Rodgers. It's nothing's official as far as long-term extension or anything like that. I do believe he's still currently under contract. So he would have had to be traded if he was going to leave anyways. But he's returning. They were able to franchise tag Adams as well, so they're getting their star wide receiver. He's going to return. Hopefully they can kind of shore out a long-term extension for him as well. And then right after this, the news that Russell Wilson is getting traded to the Denver Broncos hits. And this was crazy. So I'm literally in the middle of making mock drafts. The night before I was making a mock draft, trying to think of who's Denver going to get in this draft at pick 9? And, I thought, the night before the trade, I thought, maybe they go edge rusher to kind of fill the void of, Von Miller, who might not come back. And then, so, I type out my mock draft. And then, next day comes, Aaron Rodgers news hits, and I'm like, okay. Previously, I thought, I'm going to just kind of make this a filler pick because I think Denver's going to ultimately trade it. So I had them go on edge rusher. But then with the news Aaron Rodgers staying, I figured, who else is Denver going to get at this point? So I go back in, I edit the mock draft, have them selecting Malik Willis, the quarterback. And then 15 minutes later, it's confirmed that Denver is trading for Russell Wilson. And frankly, this was a huge shock to me because I thought, at the end of the season for the Seahawks, I thought they could go a couple different ways. I thought, you have a potential Hall of Fame quarterback, best QB in franchise history for sure. Do you keep that guy and fire the head coach and try to bring in a new coach and, get some, you still have a few more years left of Russell Wilson's prime. So, that's kind of the route that I wanted to see the Seahawks go. The route they decided to go is keep the 70-year-old head coach who has not drafted well in basically 10 years outside of a handful of picks. Keep the coach that decided to trade 2 first-round picks for Jamal Adams and get rid of the franchise-altering quarterback that you have. Unable to keep the coach that, kind of runs an archaic offense. With the high-powered offense that we see in the NFL today, for a coach to be stuck in the, I want to ground and pound, have a good defense, it just makes no sense. And, in my opinion, the Seahawks weren't even able to kind of see Russell Wilson's true potential. They never did anything to build on the offensive line for the most part. And, after Marshawn Lynch left, they've had, some decent games from running backs, but they haven't been like a power horse running team. And then, they were able to acquire some pretty good weapons on the outside, but it just felt like the offense didn't, move the ball the way you would think they could move. Because, Russell Wilson in his peak, in my opinion, he's a top 5 guy, at least very close. Like maybe he's in the 5 to 7 range, but he's close when he's playing at his best ball. So it was kind of shocking to me. But as far as like what they traded for, the Broncos gave up 2 first-round picks, including the one this year, so the 9th overall pick. They gave up 2 second-round picks, the one this year and then one next year, and then a 5th, Drew Lock, Noah Fant, and Shelby Harris. And to me, you basically, Drew Lock is a guy who was not going to pan out as quarterback in Denver, so that's a no-brainer. You get rid of him. And then Shelby Harris is a solid defensive player, but he's not a game breaker, and if you're able to include him in moving up and getting a franchise-altering QB, you do. And then really the big one, Noah Fant, I think he's going into his last year of his rookie deal, so this is kind of a 1-year deal for Seattle to get him. But Noah Fant's really the only good, not the only good one. I don't mean to discredit the other players, but Noah Fant is like the big piece of this trade as far as active players go and not draft picks. Because Noah Fant is a pretty good, talented tight end, and he's young. He's still on his rookie contract, and because of the talent that Denver has had at QB, we haven't really even seen Noah Fant emerge and kind of be the player that he can be and kind of live to his potential. So this move, this move, and then obviously there's going to be some other moves now that Denver was able to pull this off. Maybe Bobby Wagner considers going to Denver. He was another big cut. Seattle just got rid of him. It seems like they're kind of ready to move, clean house. Despite some news coming out today that they want to trade for Deshaun Watson. But you let go basically the two big. You had the star middle linebacker and you had a star quarterback. You let them both go on the same day. That kind of shows me that they're trying to rebuild. And I think that would be a huge pickup for Denver if they could get Bobby Wagner, and then if they can also get their Hall of Fame pass rusher Von Miller back. Von Miller has kind of said, he's interested in re-signing with the Rams, but if things kind of don't work out there, he's also interested in going home and, headed back to Denver. That would be crazy because Denver already had a really good defense, and I think Von Miller was kind of hurt at the beginning of the year when he was playing, because you saw when he went to the Rams, he turned it up, and Von Miller was still that elite pass rusher that he's always been. So I would be really interested to see if he could go back to Denver. That would be exciting. And Denver immediately is a contender. It's going to be a very tough division that they're in. But with Russell Wilson, all the weapons they have at receiver, you got Judy, Hamler, Sutton, and Tim Patrick. You got like a legit core of receivers. And then Alberto, I think, is still a good tight end. He's probably got a better O-line in Denver than he's had in the past in Seattle, even though Denver could kind of work on that. And then their defense is just legit. They've got a lot of great young players infused with some really talented kind of veteran guys as well. So I'm interested to see kind of how things go with Denver this coming year. For Seattle, I still just I don't understand why get rid of Russ instead of Pete Carroll. Like, Pete Carroll's 70 years old. Like, I can't imagine him wanting to coach for another 10 years. And maybe Russell Wilson's not going to play for another 10 years, but would you say like maybe he plays 5 to 7 years? Probably. And will Pete Carroll coach that amount of time? I'd say probably not. And like unless Seattle's able to pull off a Hail Mary like and trade for Deshaun Watson, which frankly I don't think that's even going to happen because they did get a bunch of picks, but they only have one first round pick this year, and then they got the 2 next year. So I'd be curious, like, do they even have the capital to make a move for Deshaun? And then does Deshaun want to go? I know he has a no trade clause, so would he want to go to Seattle, play for a 70-year-old coach? They basically ran the entire Seattle Seahawks like team out of the team. Like, once upon a time this team had Cam Chancellor, Earl Thomas, Richard Sherman, Bobby Wagner, and then you had Russ, Marshawn Lynch. And Pete Carroll kind of just ruined the relationship with all those guys. Many of them left like not on good terms. So is that a team that Deshaun Watson wants to go and, reboost his career at? I don't think so. I'd be surprised. And then it's like, they got Drew Lock and they got Geno Smith at QB. So it's like if you're rolling with those 2 guys as your QB, there's a good chance that they're going to get a top 5 pick themselves next year. And then you pair that with, Denver's pick, which is probably going to be later in the first round because we'd assume that they're going to be pretty good. So that's just interesting. I'm curious to see like what does Seattle do with the rest of their team. What do they do with DK or Lockett? And then the thing too is this Jamal Adams situation. Jamal Adams, his whole thing, like he pushes his way out of the Jets because he wants to play for a more talented team. He wants more, quote, dogs in the locker room. And he also wanted the bag. He wanted money. And so he forces his way to Seattle. Seattle gives up a ton of draft capital to get him. And then he comes in, they make the playoffs once, and then the next year he gets hurt, and they don't have a good season. And then besides that, they did extend him, so now he's the highest paid safety in football, and he's not playing like it, frankly. When he was on the Jets, his final year, he was a game-changing safety. He had a game against the New York Giants where he practically single-handedly won that game. He created multiple turnovers. He had the strip fumble touchdown on Daniel Jones, and he hasn't been that same player in Seattle, and he's getting paid a crazy amount of money. So it's like, what does Seattle do with him? They might not be able to trade that contract. And then, like DK is still young. I think he's entering his 4th season in the league. So, like, do you keep him for the rebuild or do you trade him now for assets? Because for DK, you can probably get like a 1st-round pick. He's one of the best, young receivers in the NFL. So that's just kind of my take on the Seahawks-Broncos trade. But we had a lot of other things kind of going on the same week. Obviously the Aaron Rodgers stand, what does that mean for Jordan Love? Is Jordan Love going to get traded to another team, or is he going to be stuck on the Packers until Aaron Rodgers decides to hang it up? That I think it's a little different situation than like the Brett Favre Aaron Rodgers situation, because We saw what Jordan Love had to do, even if it wasn't a kind of limited time. I think it was just 2 games this year. But he clearly didn't show like he's going to be the Aaron Rodgers next year or anything. So he still might develop into that guy. Maybe even the change of scenario can help that. But like, does he want to sit on a team and just kind of wait for another guy to retire? That's kind of like the Jimmy G was in that position a few years back. He was on the Patriots with Tom Brady, and then it's like Tom Brady's not retiring right away. Like he still stayed for quite a few seasons. So Jimmy G is like, I don't want to wait him out. So that's kind of interesting. Like, what do they do with Jordan Love? Do they trade him to the Colts or something like that? And then the other big thing we had, I think this might have even been the day before, was the Calvin Ridley suspension. So Calvin Ridley, I'm pretty sure this happened after he kind of walked away from football to focus on his mental health. He goes into a sports booking app and he bets $1,500. 3 parlays, includes the Falcons in all 3 of them. And the NFL found out basically they have like insiders that they pay to kind of watch to see if NFL players' names pop up. And this is a super serious thing for the NFL, because they care about the integrity of the sport. You know, if you find out that players are gambling on games and potentially altering games due to this, then you don't have a fair sport. And this can be a major thing. So I think initially everyone's kind of looking at this like, you know, a year is a really long time for a suspension, especially based on the fact that the guy wasn't playing at the time and like the small amount of money that he was betting. But it's also like the NFL has to have a standard for something like this. You know, I think a year might be a little bit excessive, but you absolutely can't have your players gambling on games. And then like, you know, it's not a good look for Calvin Ridley with everything going on. He was already having like this mental health stuff, and then like for him to go out and, you know, get suspended for another year, so he's missing 2 years of his prime. I think he's gonna lose out on $11 million. It's unfortunate. You know, hopefully they can kind of reduce the suspension, maybe half a season or something like that would be more fair. The other thing too is Calvin Ridley apparently was like a trade was in place to send him to the Eagles, and Atlanta actually like, you know, respectably like said like, you know, we're gonna hold off on this trade. Basically, because this news is about to hit, we don't want to screw the Eagles over, trade him, and then the moment he gets sent over there, he's suspended. So that's kind of nice that Atlanta was looking out and not trying to kind of screw someone over when they probably could have. But you know, it's tough, and like I hear the arguments out there, and I understand them. Like the NFL's policy for others, you know, other suspensions such as like domestic violence and some of these other things that have happened, DUIs and whatnot. Like I'm not here to defend those suspensions, or to say, you know, they're justified. Like I hear people say like, you know, Josh Gordon suspended for multiple years of his career for smoking weed, when Calvin Ridley suspended for a full year just for betting on games. And then like then you get like I want to say Ray Rice was suspended for like 6 games, and there's like video of him hitting a woman on camera. And like, so I understand. I'm not here to defend some of the other suspensions, but I do also understand where the NFL's coming from. And like, the NFL cares about money at the end of the day. And if you go in there and you do something that can potentially affect their money, then they're gonna come down hard on you. And that's exactly what happened with this Calvin Ridley situation. It is kind of crappy, and you know, I do think a year is a little excessive. But they're kind of making their statement like, this is unacceptable. If you do this, you're gonna face very harsh consequences. You know, so that's kind of the crazy situation with the Calvin Ridley. We also had Mike Williams returning to the Chargers. This was on a 3-year, $60 million deal. That's crazy. So basically, Mike Williams is, getting paid in the top 5 receiver money or very close to top 5. And to me, it's like if you let the guy hit free agency, then like you kind of have to overpay because you're in a position like they didn't want to franchise tag him, but like let's say a team in free agency has a ton of cap space like the Colts, and they want to give him a 3-year, $60 million contract. He's just going to take the money. So if you're LA, you kind of have to just overpay him to bring him back. But $20 million a year for a guy who hasn't stayed healthy his entire career, while you're also paying Keenan Allen $20 million a year, you're basically tying up 20% of your cap space into wide receivers. And then like you're kind of banking on Mike Williams performing at that elite level more consistently. Because there's certain times where he's playing and it's like, okay, yeah, it's justified to pay him $20 million a year. This dude is crazy. And then there's other times where it's like you don't even really see him much in the game and he's getting 2 catches or something like that. So that's it's interesting. But obviously you want to keep talent around your young quarterback in Justin Herbert. You don't want to let a guy like that leave, and then you're in a position where you got to be kind of more desperate to bring a replacement in. So I understand it from that perspective. And then a couple other big trades have kind of gone down. Carson Wentz traded for the second time, basically back-to-back seasons. The Colts weren't happy with him, so they're shipping him to the Washington Commanders for 2 third-round picks. One of those third-round picks can turn into a second if he plays 70% of the snaps, I believe. And then the Commanders get Carson Wentz, and then it's also kind of like a swap of. No, the Commanders get a second-round pick as well from the Colts. So the Colts get those 2/3 back. Oh, okay. So they're swapping second-round picks. And that's interesting. Like Washington's always been a team like you don't get a top guy that does not want to go to Washington. So unless you draft one, you're kind of in that limbo state where you got to get like Kirk Cousins, Ryan Fitzpatrick, those kind of guys. And like Aaron Rodgers wasn't going to go there. They weren't going to be able to trade for Russ. So getting Carson Wentz, I think, is somewhat fair. He's better than what options they have currently. And for the Colts, it's kind of interesting. Like, where do you go from here? Because you got rid of your quarterback without potential of a replacement. Like, if you look at some of these other teams, like I guess you could say the Seahawks are in that same boat, but like Denver, they traded for a QB before getting and included their current QB in that. Or like the Niners drafted Trey Lance, and now they're expected to get rid of Jimmy G. And now like the Colts, they're going to be in interesting position because it's like, do you trade for Jimmy G? Do you trade for Jordan Love? It's like, are these guys even much better than you had in Carson Wentz? And then I want to say the stat is 5 QBs in 5 years. That's crazy. Like, you got to eventually keep a guy and get a guy that you have confidence in going forward past one season. And like, I know some of it was like injuries, retirement, and then you had like, Phillip Rivers, he was old, he retired afterwards. So like, I understand why they're in the position they're in, but it's also just kind of, it's like you guys have to go out and make a move now. I don't believe they have a first round pick. So it's like, what kind of assets do you have if you do want to trade for someone? So that's kind of interesting. And then the big trade that happened today, Khalil Mack is being traded from the Chicago Bears to the LA Chargers for a 2022 second round pick and a 2023 sixth round pick. And this is crazy. So honestly, I like this trade for kind of both teams. Chicago is, I think they're eating a lot of cap for this trade, dead money and everything. So in that aspect, I think that's kind of a bummer for Chicago. But Chicago doesn't have a first-round pick, and they need to surround second-year quarterback Justin Fields with weapons. And now having 2 second-round picks, they can potentially, take a shot or two at weapons to build around Fields, or they can bundle those picks to move up into the first round and go after a guy that they really like. So overall, I think this is good for Chicago. And then, you know, Broncos add Russ to the division. You already got Derek Carr and the Raiders. You already got Patrick Mahomes that you got to go against twice a year. You got Joey Bosa. Now you add Khalil Mack on the other side. You have two superstar pass rushers. That's huge, and especially if the Chargers are gonna try to take that next jump, having elite pass rushers is gonna make their defense better. And then, they're like we said earlier, they were able to retain Mike Williams, so things look good with that as well. And those are kind of the big moves. We are for sure going to have some more. I believe the Deshaun Watson court hearing is tomorrow. So they're going to determine whether or not he's getting criminal charges. If there's no criminal charges, he's probably good to go and play next season. Last time I was looking into this, I don't think the NFL has ever suspended a player for civil lawsuits. So basically, that's all that needs to get cleared away, is whether or not Deshaun Watson's going to have those criminal charges pressed on him. But I want to, like I said, I want to get into some more NFL draft content. I've said this before, every time that we talk about this, like, I realize that free agency is starting Monday, and there is going to be a lot of things happen in free agency that will alter some of the way mock drafts look, what kind of needs teams need, or what kind of positions teams need. And, there's a lot of kind of moving pieces in this. But I think it's fun to kind of dive into talking about some of the prospects. And then, as a fan, I'm a Jets fan, so every year it's like, who are the Jets going to get? Who are the Jets going to get? This year, we have 2 first-round picks in the top 10. So I'm, super excited. Are we going to go 2 defensive players and revamp the D? Are we going to go offense, defense? There's so many different routes that we can go. And so I'm intrigued to look at these players. And then, obviously, as we get closer to the draft, we'll have a better perspective on what teams need what kind of players can go where. But we've seen the Senior Bowl, and we've also had the NFL Combine. So there's been some players kind of rise up the ranks, and there's been some players kind of fall down the ranks as well. So I want to get into a little bit of it, and then we'll cover more draft content as things progress and as we get closer to the NFL draft. So I'm only going to do a 32 team first, or just the first round mock draft. We're not going to do every team because multiple teams don't have first. But to kick things off, Jacksonville Jaguars selecting Ikem Ekwonu, or Ike Ekwonu, the tackle. And I think, I've heard a bunch of people kind of go back and forth on who's the number 1 tackle in this class. Is it Evan Neal, or is it Ike Ekwonu? And honestly, I think it's kind of safe either way. Both guys have experience playing multiple positions on the O-line, so the Jags are kind of up in the air. I know they tagged Cam Robinson, so they're going to bring him back, but they still need help on the offensive line. And then it's do they take a pass rusher here in this position as well, when they've already invested a few first round picks at edge? So I think it's safe to build around your quarterback, second year QB. Coach Doug Peterson is going to kind of understand how valuable having an offensive lineman is. So I think they go after this guy, Ikem Ekwonu. They might see him ranked the best in the class as far as tackles go, or they could go Evan Neal. I think it could go either way with this. And then number 2, I have the Detroit Lions selecting Aiden Hutchinson. I think this is one of the only, this one, at least for now, I think this is a pretty solid pick. This is kind of who everybody has mocked to the Lions, outside of some wacky mock drafts. I've seen a couple people put wide receiver 2nd overall, or quarterback, which I think there's a very slim chance either of those things happen. Aiden Hutchinson is here at this pick. You take the guy from Michigan, that like the consensus top pass rusher. I think they're gonna really like it. They're gonna have like a building block on the offensive and defensive line within the last two drafts with Penei Sewell and now Aiden Hutchinson. And I think this is a home run pick. As long as he's here number 2, I think this is the pick. It is possible that he goes number 1 to the Jags, but I think it is safe to say he'd go number 2. And then Houston is like one of the biggest what ifs in this class, because there is a lot of different ways they can go. If you look at their roster, they need pretty much everything, especially with the fact that they're going to probably trade Deshaun Watson soon. The rumor is they're like going to clean house. Laramie Tunsil's probably on the trade block. Brandon Cooks. So, the way if they do end up trading everything, they gotta build an offensive line again. And you get to start fresh on rookie contracts. They did like what they saw with Davis Mills, so I think you at least try to build on the offense. They could go Kayvon Thibodeau here, but I think it's safe to go Evan Neal because you give yourself a franchise tackle, and then you can try to get the best development out of Davis Mills. And then I don't think Tunsil even played much last year at all, so like it's an upgrade over him not playing as well, even if they do trade him. And then if they don't trade him, like Evan Neal's versatile, so he can play at multiple positions on the O-line as well. It doesn't have to be left tackle. And then number 4, my Jets, I have them taking Kayvon Thibodeau. This is kind of like my Jets fan pick, I guess. I would say I'm a little hopeful that he's available at number 4. I think there's a good chance that he goes number 3. But if he is available, I think you have to run to the podium and you turn the ticket in and you draft him. I think he has franchise edge rusher potential, something the Jets haven't had since John Abraham. And this is a guy who, for whatever reason, the NFL media wants to bash him recently. But this is a guy, like, if you turn the tape on, he is incredible to watch. He's super athletic, and you can tell he's a great edge rusher, good against the run. For a while, like before he got hurt and before Hutchinson kind of had the late season surge, Thibodeau was like the consensus number 1 pick. So it's kind of weird, like why all of a sudden those things have changed. But I think if you bring Thibodeau in, that allows you to move Franklin Myers to the middle. You let him be an interior D lineman again. In the middle, he's paired with Quinnen Williams. And then on the other side, you got Carl Lawson. So this could be a formidable defensive line. And the Jets had a horrible defense last year. So if you're able to add, especially because Carl Lawson's coming back this year too. So if you're able to add 2 defensive ends that are starters in this offseason, then I think that's big. And that can go a long way to helping fix this defense and improving over 2021. And then number 5, the New York Giants. I think this pick might be like considered the reach to some people, but from what I've heard, the NFL is really raving about this guy, Trevor Penning. He's the tackle. This is a guy who super tall. I think he's 6'7", and he's just a mauler. And the Giants already kind of have Andrew Thomas at left tackle. So if you bring in Trevor Penning, you got the 2 tackle spots tied up for years to come. And this is a guy who's moving up draft boards. He looked good at the Combine, and he looked phenomenal at the Senior Bowl. So I could totally see him kind of moving up and potentially even jump into Charles Cross. It's you never know how teams view prospects. So this is, in my opinion, one of those picks that I think they could take him a little higher than some mock drafts or some media people might think. And then number 6, I have the Carolina Panthers selecting Kyle Hamilton. This is kind of it's a tough pick because I think Carolina is going to be all in on Deshaun Watson if they can get him. And then besides that, it's like I don't think Carolina has the patience to deal with a rookie QB. So do they go with a Malik Willis, a Kenny Pickett? I don't think they do. Like, And if I'm one of those players, I don't want to go to the Panthers either, because you got a head coach that's literally on the hot seat. And, things, I do like some of the weapons they have, but like the way that they benched PJ Walker, Cam Newton, Sam Darnold, it's like the way that whole season played out. I don't think it's safe for them to take a rookie QB. And then I'm just going kind of based on the history of Matt Rule drafting. They like the defensive guys, and they've taken, who they think is the best defensive guy in the last couple drafts. And I think adding Kyle Hamilton to the secondary they already have with Jeremy Chin, C.J. Horn, or C.J. Henderson, J.C. Horn, I think they have a legit elite secondary with this. And Kyle Hamilton, if you turn the tape on, he is the best safety in this class. I know some people are kind of saying he could slide because of the slow 40 time. I'd imagine that he's going to have a better 40 at his pro day. But also, like, I don't want to base everything on a 40 time, because if you turn the tape on, this guy is truly elite and a ton of fun to watch. So then moving on, the Giants pick again at 7. I've got the Giants taking Trayvon Walker. This dude is 6'5", 270. The Giants need an edge rusher, and he's a guy that he's versatile. He can play all over the D-line. And a lot of people I've read into say that he was actually kind of underused as an edge rusher at Georgia. So they might see him as a really good complementary piece to what they already have in Leonard Williams, Dexter Lawrence, Azeez Ojulari. So that can be legit for the Giants. And also they're, adding a big piece on the offensive line and the defensive line. And, that's, in my opinion, the best way to build your football team. If you have a good foundation at the line, then you can go out and you get weapons on the outside. And, that's how you build an elite football team, in my opinion. And then 8, I have the Falcons going Jermaine Johnson, pass rusher from Florida State. They have been kind of searching for an edge rusher for years. They had a couple good seasons from Vic Beasley, but then he just fell off. It might have been an age thing, but they've been kind of searching for that edge rusher. They drafted Tack McKinley a few years back, and now they go Jermaine Johnson, kind of hoping that he's that guy that they've been looking for. And he's another guy kind of rising up the boards. He had a really good combine, and then he was one of the best players at the Senior Bowl. And then, so number 9, this pick, honestly, we could go a number of ways. It's going to really kind of come down to, what other moves Seattle makes in the offseason. But, right now, I would say they probably take a swing on Malik Willis. I think they've got enough guys, veteran guys ahead of him, so you don't need to rely on him to start year 1. And he does have a ton of talent. So I think you could potentially make a move like that. Malik Willis is a super good athlete, and he's got a crazy arm. So I think he's got a ton of potential in the NFL. It's just going to come down to who drafts him and how quickly do they ask him to start. Maybe he's ready sooner than what people are saying, but everyone that I've listened to says that he could use a year or two sitting on, learning the NFL game a little bit better. And but I do think he's the most talented QB in this class. And then it's just going to be a matter of what team's going to be able to draft him and use his talents the best. And then number 10, my Jets pick in. This is with Seattle's original pick. I've got them going Garrett Wilson, and I think this pick could change depending on what the Jets do in free agency or the trade market as far as addressing the receiver position. But if we go into the NFL draft and all we have is Corey Davis and Elijah Moore, we've got to take Garrett Wilson here. Garrett Wilson is a super good route runner, and he's got great hands and pretty good speed too. He ran I think a 4.37. So he's a guy, I don't think he's going to be Jamar Chase year 1, because I think some of what we saw last year was kind of historic. But I do think he can be a very good receiver and, could turn into the best receiver in the class. And then pick number 11, I've got the Washington Commanders going with Charles Cross. They lost Trent Williams a couple years ago, so I got them going with the left tackle here to kind of build that offensive line. I did think maybe they could make a move for like a Malik Willis if he was here, but they've already traded for Carson Wentz. They're under contract with him for a few more years, so I think they go Charles Cross. Maybe they go QB in round 2, so they have another guy in the room, in case Wentz gets injured or doesn't pan out. But that's how I see it now. And then I'm gonna kind of try to go through some of these a little faster. I don't want to spend too long on it. So I got number 12, Minnesota Vikings get the best corner in the class, Sauce Gardner. This is a guy who didn't give up a single touchdown in college, and you add him to the Vikings defense. This is a good way to kind of revamp things here in Minnesota. Pick number 13, Cleveland Browns take Drake London. Last year they got rid of Odell, and then the rumor is like Jarvis Landry might not stick around for a whole long time, so they have a huge need at wide receiver, no matter what happens with the QB. And Drake London, depending on who you talk to, is arguably the best receiver in the class. It's kind of Treylon Burks, Drake London, and Garrett Wilson. I've heard completely that order flipped and whatnot. But Drake London is a huge receiver, great jump ball guy, 50-50 ball guy. But also, he's a better route runner, and he's better after the catch than a lot of people say. He gets a lot of criticism for those things because I don't think he's like the fastest dude straight line speed, but like you put the ball in his hands and he's making plays. And then pick number 14, I've got the Ravens going David Ojabo, the edge rusher from Michigan. This is a dude who paired really well with Aiden Hutchinson last year, and they both saw a ton of success. So I think adding him to the Baltimore Ravens defense would be a good way to kind of help rebuild things there on defense. And pick number 15, the Philadelphia Eagles have multiple first-round picks. So I think they're going to go kind of best player available at each pick. So pick 15, I think they go Derek Stingley. Derek Stingley in his freshman year was dubbed the best corner in his class. And then he dealt with some injuries the last couple years. Because of that, I think he slides down a little bit. And Philadelphia sees, a guy that they think could have been a top 5 pick had he not got hurt. They take him here at 15 with multiple first-round picks because they have the ability to do so. And you pair him up with Darius Slay, and I really like that pairing. And then pick 16 is also the Philadelphia Eagles. I've got them taking Jordan Davis, the defensive tackle from Georgia. Fletcher Cox is getting a little older in the years, so I don't think he's going to be there forever. And if you bring in Jordan Davis, you get an elite, super athletic defensive tackle. He's not the same type of player as a Fletcher Cox, so that could potentially change things. But he is a solid defensive tackle, so you go and you rebuild this defense for Philadelphia. And pick 17, I've got the Chargers selecting Trent McDuffie. They've really invested in defense right now, bringing in Khalil Mack. You get one of the better corners in this class. Some guys even have him as the number 2 corner. He's a guy who can play on the outside and in the slot, and I think he adds really nice to the secondary there in LA. And then pick 18, the New Orleans Saints select George Karlaftis. Karlaftis is a guy who is really versatile off the edge. He's good in the run game, and he's a decent pass rusher as well. So New Orleans kind of looks to build on the line. They're going to lose a lot this offseason, most likely. They're in a tough cap position. They got a new head coach. So I think Dennis Allen's going to go, let's build on this defense. He is a defensive-minded guy. And then at pick 19, the Philadelphia Eagles go Treylon Burks. So the Eagles have used, if this happens, they've used 3 first-round picks in a row in consecutive drafts, at least, on wide receiver. But I think Burks is, he's a good complementary receiver to what they have in Devonta Smith. Burks is really good after the catch. He's gotten comparisons to Debo and A.J. Brown in those regards. And some people are knocking his 4.5 40, But the funny thing is, if you look at these other guys, especially the two dudes I named, or like Devontae Adams, DeAndre Hopkins, all of these, top end receivers had a similar 40 time. You don't see a lot of 4.3 guys being the best receiver in football. So I think Burks would be a nice fit there. He's a big dude, and he's still really athletic and great after the catch. And then pick number 20, I got the Pittsburgh Steelers going with Kenny Pickett out of Pitt. Kenny Pickett comes in here. I think he's the most pro-ready quarterback. Does he start right away? Maybe, maybe not. But if he does have to start right away, I think he's in a better position than most other rookie QBs would be. Because you have a good young tight end in Pat Freiermuth. You have one of the best young running backs in Najee Harris. And you got a good young receiving core. So he comes in. He can be kind of like Big Ben was in his early days, where he was relying on Jerome Bettis to run the rock. He could come in, be on a run-heavy team, and then kind of just go through those progressions and potentially be the guy in Pittsburgh. And then pick number 21, the New England Patriots select Andrew Booth Jr. from Clemson. With Stephon Gilmore leaving last year, this year J.C. Jackson's going to leave most likely. The Patriots absolutely need a cornerback, and Andrew Booth is not only a great cornerback prospect, but he's also great at creating turnovers, and that's going to be a big hole with J.C. Jackson probably leaving. So I think that's the pick there. Pick number 22, Tyler Linderbaum to the Las Vegas Raiders. He's arguably the best interior lineman in this class, and most people have him as a top 5 prospect, but also a lot of NFL teams don't value taking a center super high in the draft. So I think he falls here because of that. But Vegas they're committed to building the O-line, and I like the pick there. And then number 23, the Arizona Cardinals go with Devontae Wyatt and the defensive tackle. Now, they're going to lose a lot of pieces on defense most likely. Chandler Jones is likely out. So if things all went perfectly for them, ideally an edge rusher would be here. But regardless, they need to add to the defense. So Adam Wyatt would be a good addition to that defense to try to keep them playing at a high level. Then number 24, the Cowboys are probably going to lose Connor Williams. Connor Williams, Amari Cooper, DeMarcus Lawrence. So with all the losses, I think they got to invest again on the O-line. A lot of the O-line's getting up there in age. Even the rumor today was that they're thinking about trading Lyle Collins. So you go Kenyon Green from Texas A&M. He's a guy who can play guard or tackle. So if he needs to fill in for Tyron Smith eventually, he potentially can. But he can also probably start left guard day one. So you get a nice solid building block there on the O-line to kind of bring in some youth there. Then pick number 25, I have the Buffalo Bills selecting Jameson Williams from Alabama. This pick is a no-brainer to me because I think Jameson Williams is potentially one of the best receivers in the class had he not gotten hurt, and arguably the best deep threat in the class, speed-wise and everything. And the Bills are going to be in a position where they're probably going to coast through the AFC East and make the playoffs, and they won't need to rush him back immediately. They can probably bring him back from that ACL injury towards the end of the season, and then he's going to be ready to go for the playoffs. And a player like this, a deep threat like Jameson Williams, could be the reason that they can make a Super Bowl run. So I think that's a no-brainer if you're looking at the Bills and what kind of move they can make in the draft. And then pick 26, I've got the Tennessee Titans going Zion Johnson. He can play guard, he can play center. They need to work on the offensive line. Just kind of bringing in youth. They just got rid of Roger Saffold. Things haven't been the best at right tackle either. So I think this is a good pickup for them. Then pick number 27. I've got Tampa Bay selecting Desmond Ridder. I'm curious to see if, maybe Tampa tries to reload with the team that they have now. But I think they're going to lose a lot of pieces. And they're going to be in kind of a fringe rebuild state. So if you bring in a really good talented QB to compete with Kyle Trask, because I don't think they're all confident that Kyle Trask is going to be their starting guy next year. And pick number 28, the Green Bay Packers finally bring in somebody for Aaron Rodgers. They draft Christian Watson from North Dakota State. This is a guy who's 6'4" and runs a 4.3. If you add him paired with Devonta Adams, you've got a much better receiving core. And I think Christian Watson might kind of fly under the radar because he plays for North Dakota State. But I also do think that he'd be an improvement over some of the other guys they have. And then if they don't go Watson, I could also see this being a spot where Chris Olave goes. He would fit in really nice. But speaking of Chris Olave, my next pick, I've got the Dolphins selecting Chris Olave at 49 or at 29 with the 49ers pick. And I think Olave adds to the young offense that they have with Gesicki and Jalen Waddle. And you're trying to put as many pieces around Tua as you can. So I think this would be a good move. And then number 30, I've got the Kansas City Chiefs going with Daxton Hill, the safety from Michigan. I think the Chiefs are probably going to lose the Honey Badger, Tyrann Mathieu. So if you add a safety, even if he plays with the Honey Badger next year, bringing in this guy would be a good pickup for them. And then pick number 31. Ultimately, if I'm the Bengals, I'd trade this pick for the Texans left tackle Laramie Tunsil. I think that's a no-brainer. They've got the cap space to do it, and trading a first-round pick would be, justifiable. But in this instance, I'm just going to have them go with Daniel Falele. This is a guy who's 6'8", 384 pounds. Huge tackle. And the thing, too, is Bengals offensive line coach Frank Pollock, he had experience working with another big tackle in Mekhi Becton in 2020. So I think you can justify this move. And he shores up the right tackle spot. I think he'd be a solid piece there. And then number 32, the Detroit Lions, Nakobe Dean. I think Nakobe Dean could probably go much higher than this. If things play out the way I had it and he slides down to number 32, then I can totally see this pick happening. Nakobe Dean, in my opinion, is the best inside linebacker in the class. He was one of the big pieces to Georgia's championship defense. So adding him on defense with Detroit, you get Nakobe Dean and Aiden Hutchinson in the first round. That would be huge. I want to talk about a couple other non-NFL things. Like the NFL has been the news lately. But we do have non-NFL things going on. NBA, I want to talk about this incredible performance that Kyrie had the other night. He went 15 of 19 for 50 points, and he went 9 of 12 from 3. Kyrie is performing at a super high level when he's getting a chance to play. It's super unfortunate that the NBA wasn't allowing him to play the full season over a ridiculous rule when you got players like from other teams that were able to play in New York, but Kyrie wasn't. It's ridiculous. I think everyone would agree that it's ridiculous. And then, outside of that, we had, and then, also a basketball story, not an NBA, but the big news that Brittany Griner, WNBA player. So in the off seasons, Brittany Griner goes and plays in Russia. She plays in Russia because she doesn't get paid enough money in the WNBA. The WNBA does not generate money. They lose money every year. So the NBA Association pays the WNBA salary. And in turn, I think she makes like $250K a year or something like that, which is still really good money to be playing a professional sport and doing what you love. But nonetheless, she goes and she plays in Russia in the off seasons. This year she goes to Russia and she has wax cartridges in her bag and she gets caught and arrested. And she is on the opposite side of the world. And this is kind of it's a scary story because like right now, obviously we've seen the news, like Russia is not an ally with the U.S. at the moment, and Russia is in the middle of a full-on invasion over Ukraine, and Russia is not America. And so I want to bring awareness to the, you know, it feels like nowadays that the popular thing to do is to bash America, like America sucks, America's inherently racist, this and that, yada yada yada. And the truth of it is America is the greatest country still standing on earth. And the freedoms that you have in America, unfortunately, you don't have those in other countries. And she's dealing with that right now. She's dealing with Russia. You don't get the same like privilege as you do if in the States if you get arrested. I don't believe she's been able to make a phone call. It's been kind of like what's going on with Brittany Griner in Russia, and it's sad. I do hope that she's able to come back safely, because it has the potential to escalate really bad. But I want to bring awareness to, like, this is a person that bashed the United States. She was actively trying to get the national anthem pulled from WNBA games, and it's like you need more awareness than that. You need more awareness than to go to a country that weed is illegal and you bring weed to, like, and try to sneak it in, and like you should have more awareness than this. Hating on America does not make things change. We need to understand that, like, we are blessed to live in an incredible country that we live in, and the more that we talk down on it and try to build these negative stories around our own country, the worse we're putting ourselves in, the worse position we're going to be in. And frankly, most of us have not been to other countries to understand how nice we have it here in America. And it's unfortunate. I think she does understand now that, America is clearly the better country between us and Russia, because they're going through a full-on, invasion over Ukraine and everything. And it's crazy that she's stuck out there. Hopefully she's able to be brought back. I don't really have much faith in the powers that be in the United States to make that happen. But the situation, I guess, could be considered similar to, like, we had ASAP Rocky over, I think it was in Sweden a couple years ago, and Trump was able to get him brought back right away. I'm surprised that nobody in the U.S., at least not that I've seen, has kind of tried to make a statement to bring her back right away. But that's just my kind of take on that. And then to wrap things up, I know this has been a longer episode. We have had a super fun week in sports. I want to talk about the UFC card this weekend. We've got Thiago Santos versus Ankalaev. That's the main event of the card. Santos has not really been his best since the Jones fight. He got his knee battered in that fight, and he came back and he hasn't really been the same. He had the fight with Rakic. He had the fight with Johnny Walker that he won, but he hasn't been the same, like, knocking dudes out and everything. And then Magomed Ankalaev, this dude's he's a dangerous threat at 205. He only has one loss, and it was a crazy loss. This was a loss where he tapped to a submission by Paul Craig with literally 1 second left in the entire fight. This was in the third round with 1 second left. But this is a guy, like, when he's at his best, he could potentially be fighting for a belt here very soon. And I think these are 5 and 6 in the rankings. So it's top 5 matchup. They're probably one fight away from the belt, whoever wins this. And then some of the other fun fights I like on this: Marlon Moraes versus Song Yadong. Song is only 24 years old, and he's on a 2-fight win streak. He recently got a TKO in November. And then Moraes, he's kind of on a 3-fight losing streak. But the guys he's lost to are all super good. He lost to Corey Sandhagen, Rob Font, and Merab. And the Merab fight was crazy because, like, the first round, Moraes, like, seemingly was putting him out, and the ref just let things go, and then Merab was able to kind of grapple and able to stay alive, and then, he edged his way to the second round, and then he won in the second round. He got a finish. So I'm curious. I think this is going to be a really fun stand-up fight. And then Sodiq Yusuff versus Alex Caceres. Alex Caceres, Bruce Leroy is his nickname. He's on a 5-fight win streak. And then Yusuf was on a 6-fight win streak before he fought Arnold Allen. And Arnold Allen is like one of the best featherweights at the moment. So no, like that's not a bad loss by any means. So I think this is gonna be a really fun fight. Khalil Roundtree versus Carl Roberson. This is also a fun fight. Roberson did lose his last 2 fights, but it was to Brennan Allen and Marvin Vettori. And then Roundtree's last fight was that crazy, like, I want to say it was like an oblique kick. He basically like stomped out someone, Modesta. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. This was a fight in September. He had like a TKO from a knee stomp. And then another fight I'm really excited for is Drew Dober versus Terrence McKinney. Terrence McKinney just fought a couple weeks ago, and he's coming in short notice to fight Drew Dober. Drew Dober, last year he lost to Islam, and then he had a crazy fight with Brad Riddell. That was a ton of fun to watch. And then McKinney, he's coming off of his submission win. I'm curious to see how he does in this next fight. Is this going to be more of a stand-up war? Is McKinney's wrestling that dominant to where he's able to take Dober down and do things on the ground like that? And so I'm very excited for this fight. And then Alex Pereira versus Bruno Silva. Alex Pereira is the guy who knocked out Izzy in kickboxing. This is where everybody brings this, his story up. Basically like, I watched most of that fight, and Izzy was winning the fight, and then he got knocked out in brutal fashion. Like, Pereira has insane power. They say that he hits like a heavyweight. And then his UFC debut, he had like the crazy knee finish. And this is also a guy who he trains with Glover Teixeira. But then Bruno Silva has 19 TKOs and 22 wins. And he's a guy who does have a black belt, but he does not have submission wins on his record. He basically goes in for the kill. So I think both of these dudes are going to go and have a stand-up war. Very, very interested for this fight. And then a couple of the prelim fights I just want to touch on. Chris Mutino, the guy who fought Sean O'Malley last year, he was kind of like, he ate a ton of shots and kept moving forward in that fight. He gets another opportunity. He fights Guido Canetti. And then Miranda Maverick and Sabina Mazo. These are 2 young, up-and-coming women's flyweights. That should be a fun fight. And then Trevin Jones versus Javed Basharat. Basharat is undefeated. He's making his UFC debut. His last fight was on the Contender Series. And this is kind of like it had a lot of media attention for a Contender Series fight because the dude that he was fighting missed weight significantly and then called him a terrorist. So I mean that was just something you don't want to see. But Basharat has a ton of potential, and he's undefeated, so that should be fun. And then briefly I just want to touch on a couple other non-UFC MMA topics. Kayla Harrison re-signed with the PFL. She's a 2-time gold medalist in judo, and she's undefeated. And right now, like the PFL, the system that they have, she's been fighting girls they have 3-4 fights and just basically beating everybody. She's ran through everybody each year on the way to make her $1 million. But apparently she signed a multi-year deal with the PFL, and they're talking about super fight pay-per-view events. I'm curious to see what does that look like, because I don't believe the PFL gets a ton of viewership as it is being a free ESPN event. So what would a PFL pay-per-view look like? Do they do like a crossover with Bellator or something? I think that would be interesting. If you could get Kayla Harrison versus Chris Cyborg on a Bellator versus PFL pay-per-view, I think that would do numbers. I don't know what kind of numbers, but I think that would be like one of the best fights they could book. And then tomorrow also the Eagle FC fight card is going to go down. This is Eagle FC 46. This is Kevin Lee versus Diego Sanchez, and this is at 165. So this is going to be super fun to watch. this is a weight class that there's been a ton of like buzz about that the UFC should make and whatnot. And Diego Sanchez was supposed to fight his last fight before he had the whole Josh Fabia nonsense go down. And now he's going to fight Kevin Lee. I mean, Kevin Lee's last fight, I'm pretty sure was... Oh, so Kevin Lee fought like at the very beginning of the pandemic against Oliveira in Brazil and lost. And then he fought Mike Rodriguez last year. And then the UFC cut him after that. So, I mean, I think Kevin Lee's probably going to win this fight, but I'm very interested to see it. And then Ray Borg fights again at 135. He's fun to watch. He fights Ricky Bandejas. And then a couple other guys on this card. Impa Kasanganay. This is a guy who in the UFC I think showed a ton of potential. And he just lost a couple of tough fights. So they cut him. But I think eventually we'll see him in the UFC again. And then, you know, there is a championship fight in this. Rizvan Kuniev versus Anthony Hamilton for the Eagle FC Heavyweight Championship. I don't fully understand this. Hamilton's last fight was a loss in Eagle FC, so I don't understand him fighting for a belt right away. And that's the co-main. The one with the belt on the line is the co-main, where the main event is the Diego Sanchez fight. But nonetheless, I'm interested to see how it goes. One thing that I'm curious about, like the Eagle FC is supposed to be like another young promotion where they have their own kind of young guys and stuff. It seems like they're just signing everybody that gets cut from the UFC. They've also booked 2 former UFC guys for a heavyweight contention or for a heavyweight match. Junior Dos Santos and Jorgen De Castro. They just signed Dos Santos the other day. I'm interested in this, but it's also like, you know, their whole thing was we're going to be our own thing, individual of the UFC, and we're going to try to, you know, bring our own fighters up that maybe eventually fight in the UFC. But now it's just like most of their big fights are like guys that they signed from the UFC. But, you know, that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about today. You know, let me know what your thoughts are on the topics we covered. You know, leave a comment. If you like the video, please like and subscribe. But as always, thanks for tuning in.